Welcome to Let's Relieve Regret, the uplifting podcast where we talk about how to relieve what you're worrying about.
It can feel so good to finally let go. Let go of past hurts, let go of old grudges, let go of self-doubt, self-shame.
The thing is, we aren't always given the tools to let go. We're told to get over it, or it's time to move on. But how do we do that?
We will share our stories, tools, and strategies of how we let go to help you let go.
Let's begin. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Relieve Regret podcast. My name is Victoria Muir-Bercia, and I am one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by
Shadoe,
my other co-host. And today we have a guest. Yay. We are joined today by Louise Carr, and Louise is a certified holistic nutrition consultant, graduated from the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. She works with midlife women. I'm definitely getting into the midlife right now, who are feeling exhausted, depleted, and out of balance with their life with all the uncomfortable symptoms of perimenopause. She believes that the food that we eat daily has the power to reduce our symptoms of menopause and is a tool you can use to manage your menopause experience. She has an online course called Menopause U. I love the name. It's Menopause U, the letter U. She educates women to know exactly what is happening in their hormones in midlife using clear and easy to understand language. She advises on the nutrition your body is craving, which will reduce uncomfortable symptoms, help you reclaim your sleep, and boost your energy. She aims to empower midlife women with the information their mothers never gave them. I love that so much. Let's talk about these things. And we'll guide you through the lifestyle changes that help you to shift out of the loss of confidence, fear of menopause, and overwhelm that can arise in midlife. When you understand the power that your diet holds to help you manage your menopause experience, you can step out of the battle with your body and regain your mojo as you deeply nourish and nurture your health. I love this. One of Louise's kind of guiding principles is your goal is to build your health, even in hormonal change, so that you can boost your daily energy, protect your bone, your brain, and heart health, and extend your active years for an exciting next chapter. So Louise and I really align in many ways in terms of my recreo.health, which is I work with women in midlife too, in brain, body, and emotional health, and that we can regenerate in any age and any chapter. So we're very excited to have Louise here to share a story with us today and just to be part of the podcast. So welcome, Louise.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. Why don't we start with check-ins? Shadoe, how are you feeling today?
Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give myself about like a 7. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Not terrible, not great. I mean, 7's still pretty great. But yeah, I'm not, 7.
Do you think the weather's affecting your mood today?
I actually don't think so, because like when we have these kind of like end of March blizzards, they're usually gone the next day. Like the snow's gone the next day. So I'm gonna just try and enjoy being snowed in.
Yay.
Victoria, how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm gonna give myself a 7.5 out of 10. It's later in the day today, and I feel like I'm hitting a wall, which doesn't normally happen, but I'm hitting a wall. I've been upping my protein, so it's great that we have a nutritionist today.
Nice.
But I'm wondering if I'm starting to hit walls or having energy because I'm like getting more tryptophan than I'm used to or something. But like I've been upping my protein, and then I'm feeling myself get tired and like want to take some little naps. Not like crazy dumping and crashing, but so I'm going to give myself a 7.5 out of 10. I just had a little 20-minute rest before we started recording today.
Nice.
So that's where I'm at.
And what about you, Louise? On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling, it sounds like you're doing more digesting and
oh, interesting. Okay.
That. Yeah.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling 8 today.
Nice.
Just a little bit of the nervous system because I'm recording a podcast.
Perfect.
I'm about to relieve my regret.
Perfect.
That's so great.
Well, you are in a safe place.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's actually the perfect segue to our cause for applause section, which I'm going to just jump right in and go first today. I was on a podcast recently, and the episode came out this week. And let me tell you, we're about 40 or so episodes deep on this podcast. So I'm not nervous hosting anymore. But as a guest, I was so nervous. I couldn't believe how nervous I was. And I mean, I've done a lot of performancey things in my life, so I hear you, and I will say that my cause for applause this week is that episode came out and it's actually really great. Like I really enjoyed how I came across. I think the person who hosted it did a really good job. And that I'll just plug that now. That podcast is called Unforget Yourself. And it's all about kind of like coming back to who you are without all the layers of who you should be on top of it. And my understanding is Victoria is going to be on that podcast too soon.
I am. So we both got invited to be on that podcast separately, which is interesting. I think my episode's going to be out in April, so I'll let you guys know when that comes out. That comes out too. So that's your cause for applause.
That's my cause for applause, is that the episode went really well. And I was nervous about being a guest, but I need to learn that I can talk. It's so silly that I have to keep learning that lesson over and over. What about your cause for applause this week, Victoria?
Okay, so it's really funny. And again, most of the time when we record, we don't know what the other person's going to say. Except for when we have a guest, sometimes we might disclose. But honestly, Shadoe, that was going to be my cause for applause in some way. Is that today on my walk, I listened to your episode on the Unforget Yourself show. I was like so happy to hear you talking on our podcast, which sounds weird, but like I was so proud of you, and I thought it was really great. And also, one of the things that you said in that podcast episode was you chose kind of being a VA or whatever, like you're trying to choose things in your life that gives you structure, but that will also give you diversity and give you like different experiences. And I was thinking about this podcast, right? And I was thinking, me too. And so my cause for applause is that we've been doing a lot of recordings with guests the past couple of weeks, and I've enjoyed every single one of our guests, every single different perspective. And I'm just really loving having different perspectives on and interviewing different people and hearing different regrets, because most regrets I can relate to, but I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that as a regret. And just the diversity that we've been experiencing on recording the Let's Relieve Regret podcast the past couple of weeks. And we've got a couple more guest episodes we're recording in the coming weeks. And I'm just really enjoying it. I also enjoy it when it's just you and I, Shadoe. I do enjoy it, but I'm also like, I'm enjoying the diversity of having guests. So that's my cause for applause.
That's awesome. I love having guests as well. So let's bring it back to our guest. Louise, do you have a cause for applause that you'd like to share?
I do have a cause for applause, and it kind of ties into a couple of things that have come up already. Victoria, you mentioned how in alignment we are with our thinking. And yesterday I was on a call with a much bigger group of women, and I felt so aligned with the people that were on the call, with the way that they're looking at the future, at the way they're looking at women in business and the planet and everything. And I not always done the best job of knowing when I'm in a really good and positive environment for me, but I could feel it in my body yesterday. And with this call, I can feel it in my body that I'm in the right place. So that's my cause for applause.
Learning how to trust your instinct and tap into how your body's making you feel. It's a life skill. That might be one of the best causes for applauses we've ever heard.
I think so. And I think it's like, it's giving me like contagious energy. So I think I'm going to bump my 7 up. I think I'm also an 8 out of 10 now.
Oh, fine. I'm going to bump up to 8 too then.
It's coming from my heart. The Zoom.
And everybody, we don't post videos, but Louise is wearing a bright pink sweater with a big giant heart on the front of it too.
And I love
big,
it.
Giant heart. So she's wearing Shadoe's favorite color. She's got a big heart on her shirt. Yeah, we're definitely aligned.
So shall we jump into our regrets?
Yeah.
And Victoria, do you have any like preamble, or do you just want to jump right into it?
Okay, I have a little preamble.
Okay.
This is an I don't regret and I do regret.
Okay.
So every once in a
Intriguing.
while, when I'm writing regrets, I'm like, but I don't regret this. And it's okay to say those things too. So this one's kind of a good sorry, not sorry.
Okay. Oh, I can't wait.
And it's also kind of general about my behavior. So it's not a specific
Okay.
experience, but
Interesting. All right, take it away.
okay. I have a behavior, let's say a behavior instead of an experience that I'd like to let go of today in order to move forward. I regret my behavior in the past, which was a learned behavior, maybe based on big T trauma or little T trauma, of being a bit of a pushover, being a people pleaser, being a bit of a pushover, pleasing people to the detriment of myself. What I don't regret is learning how to not be a pushover. So I guess the opposite of that is learning how to stand up for myself in terms of what are my boundaries, what are my needs, what are my wants, and then I'm allowed and it's okay for me to have those things. And also for me to say no, right? No is a sentence. No, I don't want to do that for you, because then it's an uneven transaction. I'm giving all of myself to you and I'm not getting anything out of it for me, which is a behavior that I used to do a lot. Like I would even say all the way up until like 5 years ago, even, right? Like my whole life. So I don't regret learning how to stand up for myself, but in the transition of learning how to stand up for myself in a way that feels kind and fair, I went from one end of the spectrum to the other. When I first started standing up for myself, it came from places of anger, right? So it wasn't like, it was like a no, F you, or it was like a nope, right? And it came from places of anger, and deep down inside myself, I was still feeling the anger or resentment towards the person that I was saying no to. And so now what I'm learning is to find that balance of standing up for myself and saying, this isn't right for me. And that's okay. And there doesn't have to be anger involved. There doesn't have to be resentment involved. There doesn't have to be irritation involved. It's okay for me to stand up for myself in ways of saying, this isn't right for me right now. I'm not feeling it. And I'm allowed to do that. And I guess when I say stand up for myself, in particular in this one, it's when people ask me to do things, and it was that I would always say yes, because there's other ways to stand up for myself that we're going to talk about in another episode. We are going to do a Me Too episode, everybody, coming up soon. And that's a totally different way of standing up for myself. But I guess more I'm talking about, I think that I had behaviors for a really long time that I thought that if I said no to people, people wouldn't like me. And so I then became a pushover. And then I thought my value was saying yes to people asking me to do things. And then I would have anxiety when I said no. It was like, they're never going to ask me again. Right. And learning how to navigate the balance of that, the middle of that, and being okay with saying no, or being okay with saying this isn't right for me. So the consequence of me holding on to being a pushover or a people pleaser is that if I continue to do that behavior, I'm going to burn myself out. I'm not going to be working on my self-worth, which we talked in another episode a few episodes ago, the difference between self-confidence and self-worth. They're two different things. Your self-worth is I'm worthy just because I am, and it's about loving yourself. And your self-confidence is about I know I'm capable of doing these things and I'm competent and capable. So the consequence of me holding on to being a pushover, I think, is a detriment to my self-worth. And the consequence of me standing up for myself in an angry way is I'm just damaging myself or the relationships I have with those people by being angry and irritated. So finding the balance in the middle is the skill, I guess, that I've been working on recently. So I did everything I could in the moments when I was a pushover in the past, because those are the tools I have. But I also did everything I could in the moments when I stood up for myself, using anger and irritation as a place to do that, because those were the tools that I had then too. And I'm moving forward learning, right? So I kind of regret both things, but I don't regret learning how to say my boundaries, needs, and wants, and standing up for myself in a kind way, or in a way that's kind to myself without anger.
Very interesting, Victoria. Do you want feedback today, or do you just want to kind of share that?
Yeah, I think we can have an interesting conversation. So go.
Sorry, I had a little frog in my throat there.
It's all right. I'll cut that out, Shadoe.
No, thank you so much. Before I get started with my feedback, I want to ask Louise, is there something you want to jump in and say right away?
I just want you to have self-compassion for yourself in every single one of these stages.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you connected with a part of yourself with the anger and irritation. Maybe your inner teen that's pushing back, and you got to know that part of yourself a little bit more. So pour love on that, even if you didn't like it or you want to change it, pour love on that part of yourself. May have been a time in life where you were not given the opportunity to put your boundary in or speak up and say, I don't like that. And it's okay for you to go through the process and reconnect with small t or big T, whatever happened in the past a little bit at that age and stage.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be a bit messy and come through on the other side. We're just human beings. So offer yourself, that would be my feedback. Approach all of it with the utmost self-compassion.
Yeah, I think that's true, because I do think part of my regret is when I found, I don't know what you call it, courage, confidence, whatever it is, to stand up for myself, it came from a place of anger. And that's also a learned behavior too. That's also, I've seen that in my life with adults in my life when I was growing up, is that the standing up had to come from a place of anger to have enough courage to do it. So I learned that too. And yeah, you're right. Like, we're imperfect and I'm allowed to change. And I guess there is a bit of fear in me with the people that I have said no to in the past or stood up for myself. Some of them have abandoned me. And I'm like, was that because of the anger, or was it because it was just, we weren't aligning as people anymore, as friends anymore, as whatever. Right. And so, yeah, there's a bit of fear in there too. So this is actually a pretty big one for me to say out loud, and those sorts of things, because maybe people listening are going, yeah, I told you so, Victoria, like you're thinking that in your head, right? Yeah. I remember when you were angry with me and said no, or whatever. Right. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's hilarious to me that you think people who might be mad at you are listening to the podcast. Because I think the people who love you are listening to the podcast.
They're probably not. Yeah.
But I've
they don't want
done that same thing.
I've
definitely shared some things on this podcast where I'm like, oh man, when that person listens, but like, that person hasn't talked to me in 25 years. There's no way they're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And I do have a curious question.
All right.
About when you talk about overcorrecting and being like almost
I guess
too
that is
angry,
what I'm doing. Yeah. Or was doing. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you were actually too angry, or was that just a perception? Were you so used to being a pushover that pushing back even a little bit felt like an overcorrection? Or do you really think you went all the way to this other side of the spectrum?
Yeah, maybe it was like my ego turning it into anger to protect me. Yeah, that's a really good question. And also, like, again, it's behavior that I've seen in adults in my life. And yeah, I can acknowledge that anger, a lot of times anger is like ego trying to protect you. I can acknowledge that. But I think what you're trying to say too is maybe the other people didn't perceive it as anger, but I did.
Yeah, that is what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm thinking there's such a wide spectrum of behavior that I wonder, like, you might have, because you were so like kind of like cocooned into this like pushover place, that like even pushing out of the cocoon a little bit felt like, oh my God, I'm all the way over here now.
Yeah.
But yeah, where like maybe all you did was like, please stop stepping on my cocoon. And you're like, sorry. Again, like I think the idea of no being a sentence, it's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but it bears repeating every time. I it's so hard to say no that I feel like we always say no, comma, and then fill in a big long rant about why we can't do something. Or we try to find a convenient excuse so that the other person just gets it, so that we don't have to like explain ourselves. So yeah, I'm just curious, like as you are like a brain fitness coach, where do you think that comes from?
I think it's deep patterning. And what I say again with rowing, I've been doing it since I was 13. Return back to that deep patterning when I returned to the sport. Like last year, I returned to the sport after 4 years. And I look back now and I'm like, God, I don't really like who I was last summer, to be honest with you, when I went back to rowing. Because I went back to the person that stood up for myself through anger.
Right.
And not stood up for myself with kindness and just saying, no, this isn't right for me. And you need to accept that. I think like the same thing happens, when we visit home.
Yeah.
I totally like love my mom, but sometimes I revert back to like the 15-year-old that hated my mom.
Yeah.
And my husband's like, why do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, he's like, why do you just revert into this other person? So
yeah,
the habits that are the deepest within us that we go back to more often or can easily slip back into are generally the habits that we created during puberty and during our teenage lives. Because what's happening during puberty in the brain is an excess of myelination. So myelination is basically a sheath, the myelin sheath. If you ever heard that term, it's basically like a protein that wraps around our nerves to cement them in. So we grow all these nerves and they create these thought patterns or these behavior patterns, and one nerve connects to another, and this highway of nerve is for this pattern and this highway is that. But what's happening when we're in puberty is we are really cementing those pathways in by we surround them with like myelin, which is like a blanket around them that cements them in. And we can create habits later in life, of course, but they will have less myelination around them unless we're really consistent, persistent, and repetitive with those habits until they become stronger habits. So if you think about the habits that are the strongest in your life, you can probably think back to, I started doing that when I was between the age of 10 and 18. Or for some of us, 10 and 25, let's say, because the brain doesn't fully develop till 25. But that excess myelination stage in our life is happening in those puberty and teenage years. So that's your brain science answer to why are those habits. So they're actually physically stronger. Like the neural pathways for those habits are actually physically stronger in our brain. So breaking them down can be harder. And it doesn't mean that we can't. I'm not saying it so that we're using it as an excuse. Well, I can't break that habit. I'm just saying that be aware and notice, this is why I created this habit. And then ask yourself, is this habit or pattern or pathway helping me now? Because often we're like, why do I do that? I started biting my nails back then, or I started this behavior back then, or whatever. But I am not my 16-year-old self or 14 or whatever. I'm my 42-year-old self. So being aware and then doing that work to intentionally change it. So thank you for just turning that over on me. So thank you.
No, I really because we say, like, you taught me no as a sentence many times. And I don't know if taught's the word because I'm still learning it myself. But
I suggested it. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I just find that fascinating. And it ties in with I work with midlife women. We also go through a brain change during perimenopause with neural pruning and come out happier on the other side.
Wait, well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Neural pruning?
Yes.
I've never heard. Please explain that.
We have a die back on like what's unimportant, what's trivial, we kind of get into this mindset of of no fucks to give. We don't care about, having an Instagram home anymore, or, Instagrammable home, or like the trivia in life becomes less important. And there's confidence that comes with that. You're not worrying all the time about every small thing. And so you can feel happier on the other side because you've put a lot of stuff down. So it's interesting to hear about those habits formed in puberty, because it also resonates with the work I do. I work in nutrition with women who are in perimenopause. And so many of the habits and the patterns are from when we first started using food, either with our emotions or our confidence and our appearance in our teens. So when we first dieted, or when we first started pushing our emotions down,
self-soothed with food.
Yeah, that's right. And it all the kind of chickens come home to roost in perimenopause, when our hormones start changing.
How interesting.
Yeah. And is this like this neural pruning, is this something that naturally happens, or is it something we need to like encourage and do in a more like proper way?
It's something we're in a natural transition. It's something that happens to all women. And there isn't a proper way to do menopause.
Specifically this neural pruning. Like, is the neural pruning something that just kind of happens, or is it something that you kind of bring your clients through in like a...
It's something that happens because estrogen is a growth hormone for neurons in our brain.
I see. Okay,
our brains are bathed with estrogen. So we're shifting to having bodies that have a lower level of estrogen all over. Our ovaries get their rest, and the baton is passed to our adrenal glands to drip feed us this lower level of estrogen and testosterone. And many of us are so burnt out and fried that the adrenal glands are struggling to take on this additional role. So it can feel like you're going off a cliff with your hormones. And then there's all the brain fog. You're just like, I'm forgetting words. I walk into the kitchen. I don't know why I'm here. It's, you just can't hold a normal conversation sometimes. And it's super scary because no one talks about this and we don't know what's going on. So just even knowing about it is helpful. But then you can do things like make sure you have plenty of healthy fats in your diet, and then eat lots of antioxidants in the dark red pomegranates, berries, cherries, and you're supporting your brain through the process. Yeah, make sure you balance your sugar so you're not spiking and crashing sugar in the day. And then your body, your brain it will go through this process, but it's got a little bit of a buffer there because you're supporting yourself and taking care of yourself in the process.
Can I ask a curious question? This is a little bit of a sidebar, but maybe not. Of course, I'm 42. So like when I'm scrolling through my Instagram feed, there's so many of these like fitness kind of instructors that are making these posts. The majority of them say it's just a post with a bunch of words on it, right? It's like, if you're a woman in your 40s, you need to eat more protein, lift more weights, blah, 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 blah. But the two things that you just mentioned right there were fats and antioxidants. You didn't say protein first. So I'm curious about this big push to increase your protein as you hit perimenopause.
I didn't say increase protein because it isn't the first line.
Yeah, it seems like that's what everybody's pushing as the first one. I want to know what your opinion is.
Okay,
yeah, what's your opinion? Yeah.
As we are losing estrogen as this support for our brain health, menopause is a risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It's not the cause, but it is an additional risk factor for us. So we need to be aware of that. When we increase our protein and work on building muscle, two positives come out of that. The first is we are preventing frailty in our bodies in the future. We're less likely to fall or break a bone or a joint. We're protecting our bone health and our muscle health, and that's important in itself. Secondary to that, when we exercise, it's one of the most powerful things that we can do to release human derived brain neurotrophic. Yeah. So we can source other support for the brain using our body as a tool. So whenever we lift heavy weights, whenever we're outside moving, and the more muscle we have on our body, the more we can generate this body-derived support for the brain. So there's your food and nutrition, and then there's your body, which is, it's not an ornament, it's not just there to be thin, it's a tool for you to feel good and also to support your brain health.
So the protein, the suggestion of upping the protein is to really support your body.
Yes.
To support you.
Yes.
Versus the healthy fats and antioxidants are supporting your brain to support you
directly. Yeah.
Cool.
And reducing stress, strategies to reduce stress, everything you can do to essentially, one way I look at it, I don't vocalize this very often, but imagine, I've had a little TMI, is it TMI, trauma, I've had a little trauma to my brain. A hockey puck hit me, or I fell while I was skating, and it's not serious, but I'm going to take really good care of myself. And so I just kind of look at it like that. What's the nutrition? Let's get some ketones and coconut oil in there. Let's load with antioxidants. Let's bring turmeric and other anti-inflammatory foods into the diet, and that will support the brain. The reason why they're saying load the protein, it is what we're learning now from the science is it is a messenger to the body to build and maintain muscle. And so you can kind of load the dose of 30 grams of protein, and your body will automatically maintain and build muscle. Even if you're resting, if you have a sedentary job, you can use protein as a tool too. And you can use the body and the muscle to protect the brain.
It's so interesting because that idea of protein, when I was in school, so part of my degree is nutrition, right? But I mean, this was from like 25 years ago. There was a big thing in science back then around, does the protein help you build muscle? Or do you build the muscle and then eat the protein to help you recover from building the muscle? So it's interesting you're saying the new science is now saying the protein can help you build muscle.
Yeah.
It's almost like instinctually bodybuilders knew that, but then science was like fighting against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And specifically leucine, the amino acid leucine. Yeah.
So, oh my gosh. Okay. So that was total sidebar, but thank you for that. That was so amazing.
But it just goes to show we're holistic. It's not one thing or the other thing. All of these things come together, but also that we have so many tools and so many ways that we can support ourselves. If you don't like lifting heavy weights, go heavy on the nutrition, get lots of walks outside in nature, bring your stress level down. There's something for everyone.
I also think, to kind of like segue back even into my regret too, is, so Shadoe and I started this podcast about a year ago. I don't think I'm in perimenopause yet, but I might be. I'm starting to have some heat flashes. There was something instinctual about the idea of let's relieve regret, and the idea of stress relief and easing stress relief for both of us. And what you're saying is we are holistic beings, right? And I also think there's been something instinctual with me to my regret about the standing up for myself, but then being kind to myself and saying what my needs and wants are. In maybe my brain is starting to prune, like maybe my brain is starting to say, that's petty, that doesn't matter, these are the things that aren't important. And I'm in that brain pruning, I'm starting that brain pruning process of this stage of my life. And so instinctually this podcast is supporting that in some ways.
And it's what we've called classically the midlife crisis in the past, where you kind of really hone down to it's hugely important for us, especially as women. For many of us, we've spent decades taking care of other people's needs in our families or at work. We kind of give ourselves away, as you've described, to other people. And it's hugely important to kind of put a stake in the ground and be like, I'm going through this process. and I need to look out for me right now, my health, my well-being, my stress. And there's a million things you can do. I'm going to pick these 3 things.
Yeah.
Don't get overwhelmed. Just be like, where do I start? Baby steps. And this podcast is one of those baby steps for you.
Yeah. I call them small and slow solutions, right? Because if we don't use the word slow, we think everything's a magic pill and we're going to get results right away. But know that every small step we take contributes to a slower journey, but that's a more impactful journey.
Yeah.
That's going to get you to who you want to be, where you want to be.
It's the tortoise that always wins the race.
Yeah. The tortoise. I should
love
get a little necklace. I should make a t-shirt that says small and slow solutions with a tortoise and a hare on it. We just gave me a good idea. Yeah.
I had one more question that is just at the core of your regret here. You talked about how adults in your life kind of made their boundaries through anger. Am I hearing you correctly? I've been kind of shown in the last 3 months or so this really interesting phenomenon where there's the type of people who don't think they're very emotional, and there's the type of people who recognize that we are emotional just by being human beings. And I feel like the people from that first group don't believe that anger is an emotion. So then they use anger because then they're not being emotional. And I wonder, I just want to kind of like pick your brain, like where, like, do you see that pattern as well? Or
yes, right? So there's this thing about, and I maybe that's why I brought this regret up too, because I was confused. Like there's this thing that like a rational person can be an angry person and therefore you're not emotional. And I think it also comes from like, I'm going to go on my feminist soapbox here, as I usually do at least once an episode. But
it's okay.
I was going to say, are we talking about men?
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? There's this thing where like, so men have been it's socially acceptable for men to be angry. It's socially acceptable for men to be angry in the workplace and treat each other that way. And that shows power. And therefore it's not emotional, because men aren't allowed to be emotional either. Men aren't allowed to cry. Men aren't allowed to show their emotions, right? So there's that whole toxic masculinity piece that's also intertwined with the like, women aren't allowed to be empowered piece. Like they're both very much hand in hand. And even women can show this, right? Like women can have male preconceived bias and vice versa too, right? Male preconceived bias doesn't mean that you're a man. You can be working in a place that's majority male and you adopt the male preconceived bias and don't even know it because the brain is so easily open to suggestion, right? But yes, right? That like anger equals strong and strong equals rational, and strong doesn't mean emotional, because emotional equals weakness. And that's the preconception that we need to change. And I teach this quite a bit too, or when I'm working with clients one-on-one, there's almost a process that we go through with most of my clients that you can feel more than one thing at the same time. And you are also allowed to feel all the emotions. And that's why I don't call them negative or positive anymore. I call them heavy or light, because we shouldn't be naming any emotion negative, because then we slip back into that societal programming we've learned, that male dominated society programming we've learned, or male toxic masculinity and female weakness that we've learned. It is really, I agree with you, like connected to how we perceive emotions a lot. And there's also been like women in my life that people are afraid of because they're like, oh, she's so strong and she's right, rational and whatever, but they're not showing the softer, lighter emotions either. So I also want to say like the anger that I observed as a kid wasn't directed at me. It was, I would watch certain adults in my life become angry with each other, or angry in situations they were in, and then they would hold them down and avoid them, and then it would like explode in anger later on. And then, you know, okay, there's a Saturday Night Live skit like 10 years ago. I don't remember which Saturday Night Live cast it was, but it was like a pushovers anonymous or something meeting. And they were like, yeah, I went in there and I told my boss and I said this and that. And everyone's like, good for you. And then it goes, and then the camera goes to like what really happened. And it's like, the boss is like, blah, blah, blah. And they're going, okay. So like people tell a story with that bravado, but that's not actually the reality either. So we think that, yeah, I went in there and I told them. Again, makes you strong, right? But what actually happened. So I remember seeing that SNL skit and thinking, this isn't even like, it's funny. I was laughing, but I was like, so many people do this and I do it too. Like, this isn't even, this is amazing that they're showing this. But yeah, Shadoe, thanks for bringing that up, because I think it's absolutely true. And that actually gives me some insight into things that I observed in my childhood too. And like the patterns that I learned about how to stand up for yourself. And now I'm kind of relearning now is standing up for yourself doesn't mean anger. It doesn't mean I showed them. And so anger's an emotion. Anger's been studied so much, right? So, you know, the two heaviest emotions and the lightest emotions. So they've actually like labeled them what's the heaviest and what's the lightest in terms of brain waves, in terms of how we feel in our body. The heaviest ones are guilt, shame, and anger. And then the lightest one is love. My only caveat to what I've said, and you've heard me say this a million times before, we're supposed to feel all the emotions because we learn something from them. And this is kind of coming out of Brene Brown study stuff too, but we're supposed to feel all the emotions because we learn something from them. But the one emotion that I strongly believe that we're not supposed to believe, that isn't instinctual and innate within our human programming and that we're born with, that I think is the societal creation, is shame. Because guilt we learn from. Guilt is I did a bad thing. How am I going to grow from this? Shame is I am a bad thing. I am a bad person. You can't learn anything from thinking that you're a bad person, because you're just going to continue to tell yourself that you're a bad person. And nobody should feel that way. Nobody should feel that way. So that's the one emotion that I don't believe in. I think we can learn from jealousy. When people are like, jealousy is an unnecessary emotion. No, we can learn from that. There's lessons we can learn, but I really strongly believe that shame is the one that we need to learn how to let go of. And that was also part of the reason why we created this podcast, right? Let's talk about guilt, shame, and regret. It's interesting. We recorded an episode early today where we did talk a little bit about shame and self-worth, right? And so shame is the one thing that I really think we should not be feeling and we should try to eradicate. But other than that, we should feel all the emotions and recognize that that's part of the human experience.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. Louise, any final words on Victoria's regret?
No, I'm just marinating in that last piece.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
It is.
Yeah, I have so many tangents, but I want to really get to your regret as well. So Victoria, one final, you've got the final say on your regret before we.
I just want to say, like, checking in with my body and myself. I feel like I'm breathing deeper. I feel better.
Good.
So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the amazing feedback. And thank you.
And thank you for our thank you for our little brain lessons there too. What was, I think I'm going to need to like look this up. The mycelination. Oh, myelin. See, you're going to have to send me that later because I don't even know how to spell that.
Shadoe learns a lot about mycelium in a short space.
That's all right. It's all good. So so Louise, we're going to shoot it over to you.
Yes.
Do you have, like, similar to how before Victoria shared her story, she shared a little bit of like background. Do you have preamble, or do you want to just jump right into your story?
I'm just going to jump right into it.
Okay, well then take it away.
So the regret that I have is that I stayed for 25 years in my marriage to a covert narcissist because I thought it was the best thing to do for my children to have a father. And now I'm on the other side. I understand that I should have removed them. I should have run. I should have lived as a single mom. But I was living codependently. And because I wasn't making empowered decisions about either myself or my kids' well-being, and taking guidance from someone who is wounded and very low empathy. I've given them a really hard journey moving forward. I struggle with the guilt and the enormous amount of grief that I have around this. And yeah, the consequences of doing this, of not waking up sooner to the fact that it was so wrong for us. I've given my kids challenges with perfectionism, self-esteem, shame, and PTSD symptoms, and they don't and didn't deserve that. I think that it's hard for my kids and for myself to have a full sense of our worth and self-appreciation and healthy self-love. It's something that we have to learn and kind of fake it until we make it, rather than having that innately in ourselves, seeing ourselves as good people. And I've voiced to them how amazing they are, but I know it's hard for them to know that and feel it. I've put my kids in danger of addiction issues moving forward. Like, the more you learn about this, the harder the burden is that you have, the heavier the load is that you have to carry. And no mother ever wants to intentionally harm their child. And I was living in a super toxic environment with them, and I should have. I run over in my mind the points where I should have left then. I should have left Christmas that year. I should have left at this point in time. So I try not to run over that too much anymore. And in doing so, in living this way or staying in this place, I've kind of run roughshod over the mother and child relationship. I had one job and I feel like I didn't do it. I didn't protect my kids from the intense anger that they've been exposed to, from the shame that's been dumped onto them, and emotional neglect that they experienced in our home. And this has made my relationship with all three of them challenging. And is something I really am committed to working on moving forward.
Thank you.
It's
Louise.
a doozy.
Yeah.
It's a doozy. We've had lots of doozies on this one though, but I think it can be really relatable in many ways, because mom shame is real.
Yeah.
Mom shame and mom guilt
Yeah.
is very real. Do you want feedback?
Yeah, I would love feedback.
Okay.
Because you do that really well, both of you.
I have a couple curious questions. First is, can you maybe explain maybe 5 points of what a narcissist is?
Specifically covert.
We tend to think of a narcissist as being that taking up all the energy and air in a room, being very outgoing and dramatic, perhaps. Or a covert narcissist is someone who is very much quieter and has a victim mindset. Mm-hmm. Like, everything is against them. Everything's going wrong for them. I just walked into that wanting to fix and heal, and I was trapped. It played right into my codependency. I can make everything better for this poor man. Also, other traits such as very low empathy, prioritizing their needs over other people, not able to see that others have needs, emotional needs, even very real material needs. There was a point where he said to me about my son that his feet were growing so fast, too fast, and he couldn't have any more shoes. And so even to the point of physical needs. Yeah, so I did a workaround for that because we couldn't control the feet. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, mainly focused on their own needs and their own wants and their own desires, unable to make space for others, very low empathy, and unable to meet others. And then outbursts of anger, because they also know not good at managing their own emotions. That whole kind of letting it build up, and then just exploding and just dumping it onto everyone else around them. And that's their shame, but we end up carrying someone else's shame when it's dumped on you in that way.
Yeah, I've heard before, like narcissism can grow from shame.
Yeah.
Like you can become a narcissist out of your shame.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the type of narcissism you're talking about, is like, because I've heard like there's narcissists where like they're the hero of the story all the time. I did this big grand thing, so I'm the hero of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you're explaining, it's interesting, it's called covert narcissism, because now I'm starting to think about like some things I've seen in my life too, is leaning into the victimhood and everything is kind of about them. That's really interesting.
Which also makes them the center. And yeah.
Thank you for that, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners right now might be having aha moments about that and maybe understanding it.
And the feeling inside is like, nothing will ever be enough. Nothing will ever be enough to make this person happy. And you get to the point where you're like, I just can't take it anymore. I can't carry this responsibility any longer, or keep receiving the anger because things are not right. Everything is wrong.
I think it's important for people to hear what you're saying right now, is that this is what it feels like. Nothing's ever good enough. And then when you acknowledge nothing's good enough, how do you set the boundaries for your relationship? And I think what I'm hearing from you is the after effect is that you really feel guilty about putting your kids in that situation.
Yes.
So one curious question I kind of have is, you were saying, I put my kids at risk for this. I put my kids at risk for this. I put my kids at risk for this. It sounds like you've gone down a rabbit hole of research of all of the after effects of what living with a narcissist is. You don't have to answer this, but maybe my feedback is okay, your kids are at the risk of this, but are they that? Because they're not, and you're trying to reframe your relationship with them now, it can be we can so easily go down the what if rabbit hole. And so especially, I can tell that you and I have brains that work similarly. Like we like the science of things. We like all the little details, and I'm to say, well, this is what's happening in my brain, and these are the risk factors. We kind of have a bit of a biology, science, physiological based background, right? And so it can be easy to weigh ourselves down with that, but to step back and say, where are my kids at right now?
And that
maybe they're at risk of that, but they're not. Yeah. They're not that.
That is something I am learning to do. I think what happened was I was in marriage counseling with my ex, and which was very punishing, and I was the problem. All these things I did wrong. And at one point the therapist asked him to leave the room and said to me, you need to learn as much as you can about covert narcissism, because that's the situation you're in. And I do have that brain, but I was given that direction. And then subsequently I was seeing this therapist, but my ex verbally abused this woman on the telephone, and she said it was dangerous. She wasn't able to see me anymore. So I had a period of time with the internet as my
with Dr. Google.
Yes. Yeah. And I went down the rabbit hole, and I had also spiraled into complex PTSD and had a breakdown myself. And so I was searching negatives at that point in time. Yes. Yeah. I wasn't rational. I wasn't thinking straight. And the grief and the guilt was overwhelming, it was like drinking from the fire hose for brain science and predictions of the future, and this, and your kids and yourself, and this is what your hippocampus looks like now. It's all shrunken.
I do the exact thing sometimes, but the thing that I've learned, it's too much. So like there's ruminating, right? When we get to the place of ruminating, and we can see that we're ruminating, we know we need to stop, because ruminating's never healthy, right?
Yeah.
And how do we disrupt that, and how do we stop it? And then there's the ruminating, where it brings us into a habit of either worry or anxiety. So I call, like, worry is when we're worrying about the past, and anxiety is when we're worrying about the future. And how do we find the skills to keep ourselves rooted in the present, but not just the present, with what the actual reality is.
Yeah.
because the perception
Yeah.
can make us think reality is different. So take a step back and really look at your kids and think, what's great about them? How are they thriving? How are they resilient?
And I would say, like the statement I made about running roughshod over the mother-child relationship comes out of this time. I was out of the relationship by that point in time, but I was hyper vigilant about what's wrong with them, and it took me a solid 6 months to a year to calm that anxiety down in my brain. And look, they are wonderful.
Yeah, what's right with them?
There is so much right there. And so I trampled those relationships with the anxiety and with the rumination. I became the person that tried to center herself with the chicken running around yelling that the sky's fallen down is at the center of that story. That was me, like, kids, you'll never believe it. This it's awful. We're all in an awful position.
I would say to that is the statement that Shadoe and I use a lot at the end of ours is, I did everything I could in that moment, and that's okay.
That's right.
Your brain or your spirit will give you what it's capable of giving to you in each and every moment. And if you had the tools then, like hindsight is the best thing ever.
Yes.
If I could have done it this way, but like if you had those tools or those strategies or those beliefs, then you would have. Yeah. Because I believe your subconscious brain is always guiding you towards what it thinks is best for you. So you have to tell it what you think is best for you. And in that moment, that's what it thought was best for you. The other thing I was going to say is, of course, you turned into that Chicken Little saying the sky is falling because you had just been observing and interacting with a person that behaved that way. And you were mimicking those behaviors as you were transitioning out of that relationship. Yeah. And I think that's very 100%. Normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So just how you told me to have compassion with myself, I would say have compassion with yourself too, right? And maybe practice some letting go, and also like recognizing what the relationship is now. What are the good things? What can we build on? And I would even play the like, what is right with my kids game.
Yes.
What is right with them?
I do that now, and I make a point of being super present when I'm with them, and that we've shifted from, I had a lot of space between myself and my kids. They now call. I have my youngest daughter chose to live with me. I have a great relationship with my eldest daughter. I see my son, and when we're together, we're able to communicate, which has not always been the way in the past, and start forging our relationship from now, from this point where my nervous system is calming down, where I'm out of the rumination, where I can have self-compassion for myself. I am then able to be present with them. And they're like, oh, thank God, because what happened to mom in the middle of all of that,
where they are seeing you as a human being
down,
too.
And we're moving from this point forward. But it was bumpy.
I think for you to tell your story too is, there's a lot of moms listening, and again, the mom guilt and the mom shame, or like, this is the relationship I wanted with my daughter or my son, but this is the relationship that there is right now. But sometimes when the relationship isn't good, we can get into a place of, well, it's always going to be this way. So those things that I wanted are never going to happen. Those moms out there listening right now, especially moms with adult kids, to hear your story, to say, here's what's happened now. My younger daughter's moved in with me. I have a better relationship. I learned we can change at any age. We can change our behavior pattern at any age. We can let go of the anger, the guilt, the irritation. We can do that work. We have to do the work though. You have to do the work. It's not going to happen magically, but recognize that you can change at any age, and your children can change at any age too, your adult children. And you can learn, you can do therapy, you can do life coaching, you can do mindfulness classes, you can focus on nutrition, you can focus on working out, whatever gives your brain what it needs to feel better and gives you the skills to have better self-worth, that those changes start to happen. Again, small with small solutions, and they happen slowly, but eventually you'll come out on the other side and you go, wow, okay, I put the work in and it paid off. And so for people to hear your story right now, I hope that that's giving them hope to go, wow. So
Yeah.
there's this transition and there's this big T trauma with a bunch of little T traumas going on in there.
Yeah.
But now Louise is saying she has healthier relationship with her kids. She's
Yeah.
still working on them, but it can happen. And hope can be a very powerful thing too.
Yeah.
And when we share our stories, we give people that are listening to them on the periphery, perhaps that's the point of a podcast. People are listening to our stories on the periphery to learn from it, but to relate to it and connect to it and get the hope too.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that. And I'm going to thank you on behalf of our listeners for that too, because I for sure know there's some people listening to this right now having aha moments.
Yeah. And what you said there about there's a lot of letting go. And when you're codependent, as I was, you're addicted to control. And so coming out, I'm like, I thought it would be me and my kids, and I ended up being no contact from my son, and everyone's angry with me because I had rocked the boat. And for all of us, there's a comfort in being in the familiar, and change is uncomfortable. I'm like, what's going on? What am I trying to say here? But I had to let it go. Talking to my son just recently, and he had a lot of anger. He had anger demonstrated to him in a very unhealthy, lashing out way. And he didn't want to bring that to me. So I'm in a space thinking, he hates me, I've done this thing. And he was going through his own process about how he wants to show up in the world, how he wants to cope with his own emotions, aware that it had been modeled in an unhealthy way to him. And I let go when he went no contact. But when he came back into contact to hear the story, I could let go at a deeper sigh to a different level. But you need to let other people go to allow them to have their own process.
Yeah, everybody has their own experience. We can all be in the same room having the same experience, but we're actually all having different experiences with how we perceive it.
Yeah. So letting go of controlling everything, of controlling everyone's experiences, of controlling everyone's outcomes as if I knew what they would be, is still and has been a huge part of this.
Yeah.
And that's the work I can do and I can control.
That's what you can control. Yeah. And
yeah,
it's so interesting you say that, because letting go has been a big part of my process. And I believe passionately, I don't know what the right word is about letting go, that I really think it is one of the most beneficial practices that you can have in your life, is practicing letting go, and practicing after you've done the letting go to practice some self-awareness. In the letting go practice, you get self-awareness and then gratitude and abundance and calling in after. But like, when I learned that letting go was like a practice or a skill, like meditation isn't just letting my mind wander and being with myself, but that I can actually get the benefits of mindfulness through a letting go practice. It was one of the biggest game changers in my life. Honestly, it changed my life. It just made me a better connected human being, and a human being with more, I've always had tons and tons of empathy because I'm a highly sensitive person. Like, I call myself an empath, but I have more compassion for myself and compassion for others too, which is different from empathy. But yeah, it's a journey, and every step matters. I see Shadoe nodding her head. Shadoe, do you want to jump in with anything? Because every step matters.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I really loved hearing your story, Louise. And it's because I actually heard some wins. I heard some wins here that I just want to let you know what I heard from your story. Okay. So we all know that our behavior is influenced by our training and our environment. So you're now in an environment with a partner who's creating this codependency in you, a codependency so strong that you took on the blame for your kids. Instead of putting the blame on his behavior, you put the blame on yourself for not being what? An effective enough shield? That's not okay. That's not fair to you. Okay. So
Oh,
first of all,
wow.
I want you to give yourself a lot of self-compassion there, that even if you were a bodybuilding shield, like capable of blocking this kind of narcissism, it would come up and around and over any barrier you put up for it.
Wow.
So please
I
just
hadn't
hold that
had
for
that thought
yourself.
before. Thank
Okay.
you.
And then the other thing I heard is, yes, your son went no contact while he figured out this other thing, because yes, the anger was modeled for him, but also your choice to leave modeled for him that that anger wasn't okay. So that's two huge wins. You were being bullied, being put into this really terrible position, and you still got yourself out of it. And you modeled for your children why that behavior isn't okay. And in that way, you're incredible. Like, this is an incredible thing you've done. And like I can just see it being so easy to stay in it, even to today. You could have just stayed. You're right, because it's so scary to rock the boat. It's so scary to get rid of that familiarity, even if the familiar thing isn't good, we crave it as humans. We want that familiar stuff, right? And it's why we unfortunately get into the same patterns, and we see these things with, and it's so easy to see it with our friends over ourselves, right? Like, we all have a friend who's been in like the same relationship 10 different times with 10 different guys, because that's what feels familiar, even though it's not good. So I just want to say, like, you are really, really great. And I think all of this negative stuff you've gone through, all the pressure you put on yourself, all of it makes sense to me. Because the other thing you talked about, when you first got out of it, you started like really focusing on your kids. And I think that's also a really human reaction to change, because then we don't have to go inside. We're busy, we're dealing with someone else's pain, so I don't have time to deal with my pain. But it's not time, it's just you're not ready. So we start looking for how to fix other people, because then we don't have to go inside, because going inside is way scarier than trying to be the things for everyone else. So I just think your story for me highlighted all of these wins. And again, so I'm sorry if I'm overstepping here or anything, but that's my interpretation of your story. And I just want to say, like, I really, really appreciate you sharing this. And I think it's going to be really impactful.
I really appreciate your feedback. It is really impactful. And I'm thinking now, just sat here, that I need to do, like, I have this kind of story in my head now about, I mean, it was the majority of my life, and how bad it was, and how did I do this? And it took away my self-trust, and I'm thinking I need to let go, Shadoe, with what you said, of that whole story, and start reframing it as, having gone into therapy and gone back and back and back, I was kind of raised for this in my family. It's all makes perfect sense. I need to reframe it as being just a huge learning experience, an opportunity for growth, and let go of, I did this and it was really bad because of that, and then I had to, and I felt so guilty, and then I had to heal everybody after that. I was still in the same pattern with my kids. Yeah.
It sounds to me like you were a mop and you were trying to clean up an ocean.
Yeah. That
And
feels
oh no, the
right.
mop wasn't enough. Like, but that's
Yeah.
not on you. That's on the ocean of
Wow.
stuff that was like
Wow.
brought to you.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
And mops are great tools. They do fix lots of things, but they weren't the tool for that job.
No.
And I mean,
And now you're learning the tools, right? Or you're learning the tools for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm learning. And as you said, looking around outside and seeing who else needs help is one way of avoiding your own emotions inside. I walked into therapy with a new therapist when I found one that would take me.
Yeah.
And the first day I went in, I said, "Oh, good luck. I've been bad all my life." And
That's shame, right?
Shame.
That's
The
shame. I'm a bad
and
person.
I've been bad all my life, and now you should see you should see the mess I've made now, kind of thing.
And nothing's absolute. You're not bad all your life or good all your life.
No,
right?
that's
Like we are complex.
Yeah.
We're complex.
Yeah. In therapy, I then found the capacity to start carrying and feeling all of this grief I had around my story and my experience and my relationship. I've never, and the fact that I was in a relationship but unloved, and that I allowed that to happen to me, and start to focus more on what I'm feeling, what the repercussions are for me. And the more healing I do for myself, it ripples out through my relationships with my kids.
And then their relationships with others, and then those ripple effect as
that's
well.
Right.
So,
and I think it'd be helpful for me to reframe the whole thing from being bad, that binary bad.
That was a chapter in my life. You don't have to label it bad.
A huge lesson, a huge learning experience.
This is why I love Shadoe so much too, because
oh no, not a compliment.
Shadoe also hates
away.
receiving a compliment, so she's gonna run away. But she also gave me similar advice in terms of my overwhelm. Was like, I was like, I'm a survivor. I survived my overwhelm, and it was like a total burnout. I was paralyzed for 8 hours, the whole thing, right? Like, But then I realized I was telling the story too much, and I needed to change my perspective. So sometimes even when we're like, I'm a survivor, but I lived through that horrible thing, we're still telling ourselves it was bad. And how do we make a decision on how we're going to tell the story?
I need to think
about, if we need to continue to tell the story,
reframing it.
How do we all kind of tell the stories in our life of like, this was an experience that I went through, but this is who I am now. Right? Like it happened. And it's so interesting because sometimes I think there's so many things, there's things in my past that I've held on to very deeply, or heavy things. And then you hear someone on a podcast or an interview, usually a celebrity, talking about AA, going into rehab. And then they're very open about their recovery. And I'm like, how is that person so confident in talking about one of the most shameful periods of their life where they were a drug addict and they did these things, and then they're telling these stories? And I always think, wow, what a skill to be able to go through that and to learn the skills, whether it's AA or rehab or therapy or whatever it is that you're doing, to be able to then say, this is my story. Or even I think sometimes like ex-convicts are telling their stories and they're like, and this is what I'm doing with my life now. They haven't let that like super huge trauma be their only story.
Because it's not, just ignore it, and because if you push that stuff down, you get an ulcer.
Exactly. We don't want to do that either.
But there's
many stories,
multifaceted.
It's part of who I am, but not all of who I am.
Absolutely.
And I can either call it bad, or I can see it as a huge waking up and learning experience.
We had a guest on a couple episodes ago. She was talking about, she's a writer and she deleted one of her books because it was just hanging heavy on her. This was the Jody episode, everybody, if you want to go back and listen to it. And she deleted one of her books because it had been hanging on her and she had writer's block. And so she decided to delete it. And then we asked her how it felt. And I might be misquoting this, Shadoe. You might remember exactly what she said, but she said, it was gone, but I wasn't empty.
Right.
That's exactly what she said.
And Shadoe and I both went, ooh, like that's amazing. Like I just got goosebumps saying it now. Like it was gone, but I wasn't empty. So almost the same kind of thing. Like the story's gone. It's there, but I'm full of other things now too. Or I don't know. There's just something, I'm like miswording it now, but there's something about it was gone, but I didn't feel empty. I really connected with. I was like, that's that's letting go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should give Louise a chance to give us any final thoughts about either your regret or anything that's come up today, and then we will move into our closing. So, Louise, is there anything you want to
Well,
say or
today,
questions you
Shadoe, your
have?
feedback has been huge.
That's very sweet of you.
You have amazing perception.
Thank you. That's very, very nice.
I'm still, I think, where am I at? I feel like I feel like I'm in transition on
Right.
on a podcast
In real time. It's
In
happening
real
right
time.
now in
That's
real
where I'm
time,
at.
everyone. Yeah.
So I still think that there is grieving to do. I kind of feel like,
Absolutely.
you know, when you let the air out of a balloon a little bit at a time, like,
And it makes a farting noise.
yes, I think I'll be doing that for the rest of my life. But I do think I need to reframe my story and my experience more as learning and a lesson rather than just bad. I think it'd be super helpful for my kids if I let go of the label of all of their childhood as bad and instead saw it in a different way as learning and just an experience and growth and promoting empathy for all of us. Yeah, so I have seen another piece of the jigsaw today that I hadn't seen before, and I'm also feeling really grateful for that.
That's so nice. That's exactly what we want to hear. So that's
the best thing that we could hear, because that's the whole point of the podcast, right? Is to allow people to have a letting go, whether they come on as a guest or whether they hear it and they completely relate to your story. Because many of us have similar stories and we just need to hear the same story from someone else to feel not alone and to have a letting go.
And I feel it's like empowering. I have a choice. Do I beat myself with a big stick for the rest of my life? Or do I reframe that into everything I've learned, everything I've changed, and all of this, like all of the therapy and the development I've done since walking away.
You led by example by walking away. And okay, maybe that took a few more years than you would have liked, but you did it.
Yeah, I was mopping for a long time.
Yeah. And now you can decide what you are now.
Yes.
You, I don't know what other powerful tool are you? I don't know how to continue that analogy. I was going to say vacuum, but you don't want to be a vacuum because you don't hold everybody's stuff. I don't know.
Amazing. So we invite you, Louise, to join us for our final part of the episode, which is where Victoria leads us through 3 calming breaths of letting go.
All right, everybody out there listening, come on to the front edge of your seat, placing your feet flat on the ground if it's safe to do so, and a hand on your heart, again, if it's safe to do so. Just acknowledge the points of contact you have with the earth, feeling your feet sink into the ground, and acknowledge that the earth is always holding you in the palm of its hand. You are always supported. Gravity will never let you fly away. And you are worthy of that support just by being a human being on the face of this planet. So take a big breath in and let your feet and your body sink down into the earth. On the first breath of letting go, inhaling, saying to yourself as you exhale, may you be well. On this next breath, big inhale in. And as you exhale, may you be kind to yourself. And on this last breath, as you inhale and exhale, may you feel safe and at ease. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Thank you so much to Louise, our amazing guest, for joining. We're going to put all of her contacts into the show notes, everybody. She has something called Menopause U, which is a program about nutrition in midlife women. And she's got a Facebook group. And do you want to quickly say, Louise, what those contacts are, how people can get in touch with you?
So you can find me on Instagram at louise.carr.nutrition. My Facebook group is called The Nourished Midlife Woman. And I have a website called louisecarr.com.
Wonderful.
And I know many, many people have connected with you, as I have and Shadoe have today too. So thank you so much for putting yourself out there, for coming to be a guest on our show. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening and supporting us. And we appreciate you so much. And we'll see you in the next one, everybody. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. This episode of Let's Relieve Regret was produced by Shadoe Ball and Victoria Muir-Garcia. We are an independent podcast supported by you, our listeners.
You can become a supporter by donating $3, $5, or even $8 per month at www.letsrelieveregretpodcast.buzzsprout.com and click on the support button. You can find the link in the show notes.
Our goal is to empower as many women as possible to overcome the shame and guilt that accompanies regret.
If this podcast helped you have an aha moment, help us spread the word. It's free for you, and it means the world to us.
Please follow us on Instagram at relieve.regret.
Tell 2 friends.
Or leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Find all this information and more in the show notes. Okay,
Bye.
bye.